Hey, everybody, real quick. If you need a season 2 recap of Pennyworth, I've got you. Just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you to it. Now, real quick, let's get into some updates on what happened to the characters since the end of season 2. It's been about 5 years since the Battle of London. John Salt was arrested, but has since escaped prison, and nobody knows where he is. Sandra is an absolutely huge singing star. The Waynes have stayed in London. They had their daughter. They named her Samantha. Thomas Wayne is now a doctor, while Martha works for MI5's science department, although she tells Thomas that she just has a boring desk job. She works there with Dr. Lucius Fox, and one of the main things they deal with is PWEs, aka people with enhancements. People just like Gully Troy, who's probably better known by his nickname, Good Old Captain Lightning. They thought that Gully Troy was a one-off. He's not. These PWEs keep popping up, and MI5 has hired Alfie to rope him in. Every time he gets one, he gets 500 quid, which is quite a bit of money. And as for Alfie, he does this with a little bit of help from Dave Boy and Bet. They now work for him. As side income, he's bought a pub, but on the top floor, that's where he takes most of his meetings for his security company. Even though he's doing way better financially, Alfie still lives home with his mom, Mrs. P, who watches Samantha during the day. Although after 5 years, she's a little bit lonely, so she tends to peruse the newspaper for the men seeking women section, and when she finds something she likes, she circles it. On this certain occasion, she finds an advertisement that says, "Older and wiser man is looking for a kind and mature female with a good disposition to go ahead and seize the day with him." She's doing this all while hiding it from Alfie, though. When Alfie wakes up, he kicks the girl out that he just slept with, and he heads into the office. Chappie, who works as a secretary, is on the phone with Bet Sykes, who is convinced that she's found Miss Dixon from Raven HQ. Miss Dixon was the one who tipped off Lord Hardwood back in the day. She was kind of Raven HQ's go-to secretary. Bet wants to go after her. She's still on the hunt for John Salt after what he did. Even 5 years later, she wants retribution. She knows that John Salt escaping from prison, he must have had some kind of help, but most people have just moved on. Chappie tells her as much, but she says, "I'll sort it myself," and she hangs up on him. Once Chappie gets off the phone, he lets Alfie know that there's a client who's in distress waiting for him. And when Alfie goes into his office, he finds out that this woman who came to him is looking for a girl that she used to nanny named Jessica, who's 18 and been missing. The woman's been looking after Jessica since she was 2 years old, and she never goes very long without calling. Well, she's gone 2 weeks, and it's got the nanny quite concerned. This woman knows that Jessica's in trouble. She went to the club where Jessica was last spotted, and it was really seedy. And the reason why she's coming to Alfie and not Jessica's parents is because Jessica's parents live quite a public life. Jessica's father is the head of the Thistle Corporation, which seems to be a big deal. So they entrusted the nanny to come and try and find her. Alfie tells the nanny that they'll get right on it, and he's sure Jessica's fine. Once the client leaves, Alfie walks out and tells Chappie, "Get Bet on this. She's the best with missing girls." And that's when Chappie has to break the news to him that Bet isn't coming in because Bet's after revenge, which means that Alfie is going to have to do this job himself. He grabs Dave Boy, though, to help out. They head to the club that the nanny went to, but they, unlike the nanny, talk to the head boss. They show the manager the picture, but he says, "I've never seen her." But Alfie knows he's lying. After a little bit of Alfie Pennyworth convincing, the club owner eventually admits that, yeah, he saw Jessica, and the last time he saw her, she was hanging out with this cult leader named Sister Susan, and Jessica left with her. And this is bad news. Sister Susie runs something called the Inner Peace Ash Room. And what she ends up doing is feeding kids psychedelic drugs so they don't even know their name. Sometimes they wake up happy and enlightened, but other times they wake up sad because they're in a brothel. She's tough to take down because she has really big connections, but the club owner doesn't know who those connections are. Alfie and Dave Boy then leave the club, and the next day they go visit Sister Susan. And it's just as the club owner depicted. A lot of kids tripping balls. They tell Sister Susan that they're looking for Jessica, but she starts doing her cult-like, "No, you're looking for inner purpose and all that," but no, they're really looking for just Jessica. And they explain that to her. After a little bit of back and forth, Sister Susan tells them if Jessica wants to go with you, she can, but If she wants to stay, she's staying. She then brings Alfie and Dave Boy to the location of where she's holding Jessica, and Jessica is doing okay. She looks healthy. Alfie explains that he's there to take her home, but when Jessica says, "I don't want to go home," Sister Susan says, "Well, there you have it. She's staying." And Alfie says, "No, we're taking her anyway." Susan tries to call some of her hippie thugs to deal with Dave Boy and Pennyworth, but they really don't know who they're messing with. They brought a hammer to a gunfight. Dave Boy just whips a pistol out and shoots the one guy in the foot, and it allows Alfie to pick Jessica up and walk right out the door with her. They don't take Jessica back to her parents' place just yet. They actually take her over to Alfie's office to talk to her for a bit. When she gets back to the office, though, she tells them, "I don't want to go home. They don't like me, and I don't really like them." And Alfie just thinks that that's talk, but she says, "No, you don't know them." Alfie tries to calm her down, but it doesn't really work. And finally, Alfie has to tell her, "We've been paid to take you home, so we got to take you home. If you don't want to stay, you don't have to." And then he pulls out a card and gives it to her. It's got Alfie's number and his home address on it. He then says, "If you run off again, don't go back to Sister Susie. Just come find me." They then take Jessica home and drop her off, and they don't even notice that the house is being surveilled by somebody in an unmarked vehicle. Alfie heads back to the office, has a drink with Dave Boy, and that's when Bette walks in. Boy, did she have a day. First of all, she walks in with a baby stroller, and there's a baby in there. She barged into Miss Dixon's place and held her and her husband at gunpoint. Miss Dixon claimed that life was behind her, she didn't know anything, but eventually her husband made a play for the gun, and they both ended up getting shot and killed. Turns out Miss Dixon was lying the entire time. That lifestyle was not behind them. They actually had a shrine to the Raven Union. And in it, Bette found a ledger full of code names that the group uses, and maybe they could use that to find John Salt. The issue is, Bette couldn't let the baby just stay there, so she brought the baby to Alfie's. And bringing a baby of two people you killed to the office, even that's a line that Dave Boy and Alfie are pretty surprised Bette crossed. She asked the boys to watch baby Julie while she go track down John Salt, but they don't know anything about babies, and they certainly don't feel comfortable babysitting this one. Unfortunately for Bette, it's really Alfie and Dave Boy are bust. Peggy's 100 miles away, and she'd probably say no anyway, and Alfie's mom's busy at the Waynes. Alfie tells Bette, "You gotta get over John Salt, just get on with your life," but Bette just shakes her head and says, "Well, at least I know who my friends are," and then she walks out. Now, over with the Waynes, as I said, they're living two completely different lifestyles, and Martha's hiding what she really does from Thomas. When Martha heads to work, she gets a phone call from Aziz. They've found a body, and they were finally able to ID it. The body had a slit throat, and it's that of a CIA agent. Normally, the CIA wouldn't be quiet about one of their agents gone missing, but in this case, they have been, which tells Aziz and Martha that the CIA agent was doing something he probably wasn't supposed to be doing. While Aziz and Martha don't know it yet, what the CIA agent was doing was escorting a doctor around London, and the doctor was the one who actually killed him. Aziz tells Martha to find out exactly what was going on. There's something called the Commonwealth Summit coming up, and he doesn't want any scandals going on. Martha, though, has to rush home, and it's a concern for Aziz that she's not balancing a good homework lifestyle, even though she said she's okay. When she gets home, though, Thomas tells her that his father has come to town, which is a surprise to everybody. Thomas and his dad don't have the best relationship, but Patrick Wayne has shown up to see his granddaughter, and he's also brought a lady friend with him, Virginia Devereaux. The four sit down for an uncomfortable dinner where Patrick brings up the fact that Thomas is eventually going to have to come home and take over the family business. But eventually Martha asks Virginia, "What exactly do you do for a living?" And her answer is keeping Patrick happy, which sounds a lot like spending Patrick's money. Martha does ask Patrick, "Why did you come back?" And Patrick tells her, "I missed my son," but she's skeptical of that. And when her and Thomas lay down for the night, she says as much to Thomas. She doesn't believe that Patrick just came back to meet his granddaughter and he was lonely and missed his son. She asks Thomas, "Does he have U.S. government connections?" And Thomas says, "Of course he has contacts. He runs one of the biggest corporations in the country." But when Thomas asks why she asked that, she can't exactly come right out and say it, because as far as he's concerned, her job is that of a glorified librarian. The next day, Thomas gets to sit alone with his father and have a chat. And that is when the truth comes out. He tells him that he actually showed up because of a Wayne Enterprise issue. and what he's about to tell him is extremely sensitive. An employee for Wayne Enterprise has gone missing with valuable information. We're talking the top secret kind of information. They're pretty sure that this employee, whose name is Dr. Glubb, is in England and will try to sell this information to the English government. And if they lose control of this information, it could mean the end of the company. So the reason that Patrick showed up is because he wants Thomas to get Martha to help him out. Thomas, though, can't figure out what Martha has to do with it, and that's when Patrick spills the beans that Martha isn't a librarian. That's just her cover. She's an active field officer for MI5. The thing is, Patrick didn't know that Thomas didn't know. And this revelation causes a bit of an argument between the two. Thomas is in denial over it, and he tells his father, even if she did do what you're saying she does, I wouldn't ask her to betray the trust of her employer. That night when he comes home, he asks Martha, did my father talk to you about anything weird? And she tells him no, not about anything in particular. He never once reveals to Martha what his father told him. But down the hall, you find out who's actually in charge of this thing. It's Virginia. She's not dating Patrick. She's bossing him around, and she wants Patrick to get his son in line. Virginia doesn't believe that Thomas had no idea about Martha, and she thinks that Patrick is an idiot for believing that story. She gets so mad that she slaps Thomas and yells, he's playing you. She tells Patrick to go talk to Thomas again and not to take no for an answer, and then reminds him that she's mandated to do whatever it is she needs to do to get a win. Her phone then rings, and it just so happens to be the guy that was parked outside of Jessica's house. He tells Virginia that Jessica's in place, and Virginia gives this person the green light to do whatever it is they were planning on doing the next morning. And early the next morning, Jessica stumbles out of her place with blood covered on her dress, her parents both dead, and she is holding the knife. But instead of going back to Sister Susie, Jessica followed Alfie's edict, and she shows up on his doorstep covered in blood. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.